I gave everything to raise my daughter with dignity, but on the day she married, I was humiliated. My new son-in-law stood before a crowd of family and friends, looked straight at me, and laughed not with me, but at me. In that moment, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life, but what he didn't know was that someone sitting only a few seats away would tear his arrogance apart before the night was over. Weddings are meant to be moments of joy where families blend, promises are made, and hearts unite. That's what I told myself as I buttoned my suit that morning. My wife was no longer alive to see this day, but I knew she'd be smiling down at our daughter. When I walked her down the aisle, my heart swelled with pride. She was radiant, every step a reminder of the little girl who once clung to my hand at the park. I thought, this is what a father lives for. But later, during the reception, everything changed. The music softened, glasses clinked, and the groom Eric stood for his toast. He raised his glass high, his smile wide. I braced myself for warm words, perhaps even gratitude for the family he was marrying into. Instead, his eyes found mine, and with a smirk, he said, and let's not forget to thank the bride's father, for well, trying his best. Then came the laugh. It wasn't playful, it wasn't light-hearted. It was sharp, deliberate, a laugh meant to cut. The room froze. Guests shifted in their seats. My daughter's smile faltered, though she quickly forced it back. And me, I sat frozen, my hands gripping the tablecloth, my chest burning with humiliation. I tried to smile, to brush it off, but the silence that followed was deafening. The man who had just become my son-in-law had mocked me in front of everyone, and no one dared to speak. No one, yet the laughter still echoed in my ears long after Eric lowered his glass. It wasn't just the sound of his voice, it was the way the room shifted with it. Forks hovered midair, glasses paused halfway to lips. Guests darted their eyes between me and him, unsure of what to do. A few forced chuckles broke the stillness, shallow and brittle, as though they were terrified of standing out. I could feel the weight of every stare pressing down on me. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard, but the humiliation burned hotter with every second of silence. My daughter looked at me from across the table, her eyes wide with hurt, her smile trembling like glass about to shatter. She tried to hold the moment together, to keep the celebration alive, but even she couldn't mask the sting of what had just happened. And me, I sat there, frozen. I wanted to stand up, to say something, anything. But the words caught in my throat. I wasn't afraid of Eric, no. I was afraid of destroying my daughter's day, of letting my anger turn her wedding into a battlefield. So I stayed quiet. But silence has a power of its own. And in that heavy, unbearable stillness, something unexpected happened. From the far end of the table, a chair scraped back. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. Heads turned. Guests whispered. It was Margaret, Eric's mother. She rose slowly, her posture rigid, her eyes locked not on me, but on her son. The air in the room seemed to shift. I knew in that moment the silence was about to break, and not in the way Eric expected. Margaret's presence alone was enough to hush the room. She wasn't a woman who spoke unless she meant every syllable, and when she did, her words carried weight. Even Eric, for all his arrogance, flinched when his mother rose to her feet. Her chair scraped back with finality, and the faint clinking of silverware ceased. The band, sensing something was wrong, let the last notes of the violin fade into silence. All eyes were on her. She fixed her gaze on her son, a look that had once commanded him as a boy, and still held power even now. Her voice rang out clear, slicing the tension like a blade. "Eric," she said, her tone sharp as steel. Enough, a collective gasp rippled through the guests. Eric's smirk faltered, confusion flickering across his face. "Mother, I was just—" She cut him off before he could finish. "Do you think mocking a man who gave his life to raise your wife makes you clever? Do you think belittling her father on her wedding day makes you strong?" The words struck him like blows. His face flushed, his posture stiffened, and the smugness drained from him drop by drop. Margaret turned, her eyes sweeping across the room. "This man," she gestured toward me, her voice trembling but firm, "has sacrificed more for his daughter than most of you will ever understand. He worked, he struggled, he endured so she could walk down that aisle today, and you dare laugh at him in front of his family, in front of his daughter. The silence deepened. Guests shifted in their seats, their faces flushed with second-hand shame. Eric stammered. It was just a joke. But Margaret slammed her hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. A joke? No, it was arrogance, and tonight the only person you've humiliated is yourself. The smirk was gone. His eyes darted nervously, searching for someone to back him, but no one spoke. Not a single person defended him. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. And as Margaret's words echoed through the hall, Eric's laugh, the one that had cut so deep now, hung in the air like the hollow sound of a man exposed. Margaret stood tall, her chest rising and falling as she stared down her son. The room was dead quiet, every guest leaning forward, waiting, but she didn't sit back down. She wasn't finished. Her voice dropped lower, steadier, but each word carried like a drumbeat across the hall. "You all see a groom tonight," she said, scanning the faces of the crowd, "but I see a boy who never learned humility, a boy who laughed at his own father when he lost his job, a boy who squandered every opportunity given to him while men like him." She pointed directly at me, sacrificed to build something out of nothing. Gasps rippled through the guests. I froze, unsure whether to speak, but Margaret pressed on, her tone burning with fury. "Eric, do you remember who paid for that college degree you brag about? Do you remember who pulled strings to get you your first job interview? Your father and I did, and yet you repaid us with arrogance." Eric's face drained of color. He shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his tie. "Mother, stop this." But she raised her voice, louder than the band had played all evening. "No, I will not stop, because tonight you mocked the wrong man. You mocked the father of the bride, who not only raised his daughter with dignity, but paid for half this wedding you're standing in. Without his generosity, you wouldn't even be wearing that suit or standing in this hall." The crowd erupted into murmurs. My daughter's eyes widened in shock, her lips trembling as she turned toward her new husband. Eric looked around, panicked. His smirk had vanished, replaced by a twitching jaw and darting eyes. The laugh that once silenced the room now clung to him like a curse. Margaret's final words fell like a gavel. "You may carry my name, Eric, but tonight you have none of my respect, and now everyone here knows why." The whispers became louder, sharper, rippling like a wave. Friends and relatives who once looked at him with admiration now avoided his eyes, and for the first time since that cruel laugh cut me down, I wasn't the one on display. He was. Eric's face flushed red, the smug grin long gone. His hand tightened around his champagne glass until it trembled. He scanned the room, desperate for support, for someone to laugh with him, to lighten the blow of his mother's words, but no one moved. A hush had fallen over the wedding hall, and in that silence his arrogance began to crumble. He forced a weak smile. "Come on, everyone. It was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." His laugh came out hollow, a pitiful echo of the cruel one that had cut me minutes earlier. But this time no one joined him, no polite chuckles, no awkward applause, only cold, expectant stares. Guests exchanged glances, whispers rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Did you hear what his mother said? Half the wedding wasn't even paid for by him. What kind of man humiliates his wife's father? Eric's charm, the very mask he had worn to win over the room, had cracked wide open, and everyone could see what lay beneath. My daughter, standing only a few feet away, had been frozen in shock. But now her expression shifted from confusion to hurt, and finally to something harder. She turned slowly to look at her new husband, her eyes glistening. "You mocked my father," she whispered, her voice trembling. "On our wedding day, after everything he's done for me, for us, do you even hear yourself?" Eric tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "I was kidding. Everyone's too sensitive. No." She cut him off, her voice stronger now, echoing across the hall. You weren't joking. You wanted to humiliate him. You wanted to feel powerful. But all you've done is show everyone how small you really are. The room erupted in a new wave of whispers, sharper this time, tinged with judgment. Guests nodded in agreement, their eyes filled not with pity for me, but with disappointment in him. Eric opened his mouth again, but no words came. His face twitched, his pride shattered, his carefully built image lying in ruins at his own wedding. The man who had laughed so loudly at me only minutes before now stood in silence, powerless under the weight of truth, and I, who had sat in humiliation moments earlier, realized I didn't need to lift a finger. His arrogance had collapsed under its own weight. For the first time that evening, I looked at my daughter. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes told me something else. She saw him now, truly saw him, and she saw me too. Not as a man to laugh at, but as the father who had always been her foundation. The collapse was complete. The band tried to recover the mood, picking up their instruments and letting a soft melody drift across the hall. The waiters continued to serve wine and clear plates. On the surface, the wedding went on, but beneath it, the air had changed. Guests no longer looked at me with pity. Their eyes carried respect, a quiet recognition of the dignity I had kept when silence was my only weapon. They looked at Eric differently too, not with admiration, but with caution, even contempt. The conversations at the tables turned hushed, sharp, edged. No one wanted to be seen at his side. He was still the groom, yes, but now he stood isolated, his own arrogance building the walls around him. As the music played, my daughter approached me. Her makeup was smudged, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know he would do that. I swear I didn't know." I squeezed her hand gently, my heart aching at the sight of her tears. "It's not your fault, sweetheart," I said softly. "You've done nothing wrong, but tonight you've seen him clearly." She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder as we stood at the edge of the dance floor. For a moment, she was that little girl again, the one who once clung to my hand, who trusted me to keep her safe. And though I couldn't take away her pain, I could give her this, the truth, steady and unshaken. Meanwhile, Eric tried to move through the crowd, tried to laugh, tried to shake hands, but everywhere he went, conversations died. People stepped back, smiles grew tight. He was no longer the center of admiration, but the subject of whispers. His own groomsmen avoided his gaze. Even his mother sat rigid at the table, refusing to look at him. For the first time in his life, Eric stood in the wreckage of his own pride, and there was no one left to applaud him. I danced with my daughter that night. The hall blurred around us, the music, the whispers, the shame. She held me tightly, her tears wetting my shoulder, and I whispered the only truth that mattered. Respect is earned, not demanded, and dignity. Dignity can never be stolen, not even by laughter. The wedding stumbled forward, but the center of gravity had shifted. The night no longer belonged to Eric. It belonged to the truth, and that truth would follow him long after the last song ended. When the wedding finally ended and the last guests slipped out into the night, the whispers did not fade with them. They followed Eric like shadows, clinging to him long after the music stopped and the lights went dim. Within days, the story spread across town. Neighbors whispered in grocery stores, coworkers exchanged glances in break rooms, and family friends recounted the night with shaking heads. "Did you hear what he said to the bride's father?" Even his mother stood against him. Eric had laughed once, and now that laugh had become his curse. At work, his colleagues teased less and judged more. Invitations to dinners and outings grew fewer. Even his bosses, men who once respected his charm, seemed to watch him differently, like a man whose mask had slipped. No matter where he went, the echo of his mother's words followed him. "You mocked the wrong man. Without him, you wouldn't even be standing here." Eric tried to dismiss it, to act as if nothing had changed. But reputation is a fragile thing. Once cracked, it never looks the same. At first, my daughter defended him. She told friends he didn't mean it, and whispered to me he was nervous. Dad, weddings do strange things to people. But over time, her defenses grew weaker. Every time she heard the whispers, every time she saw the shift in people's eyes, doubt began to settle in, and then came the small cracks at home, a sharp word here, a dismissive laugh there. The same arrogance he had shown me at the wedding started seeping into their daily life. My daughter began to see what I already knew. A man who laughs at others to feel powerful will never respect the ones closest to him. I didn't interfere. I didn't force my opinion on her. I simply waited, watching as the seeds of doubt sprouted. Because sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom or in a fight. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in reputation ruined, in the slow unraveling of pride. And as I watched my daughter's smile grow thinner each day, I knew she was beginning to see the truth not through my eyes, not through Margaret's, but through her own. Eric's laugh had set fire to his own house. And now he was the one standing in the ashes. It was months after the wedding when Eric finally came to see me. The leaves had turned, the air grown cold, and the world seemed quieter somehow. I wasn't expecting him, but when I opened my door, there he stood. Gone was the swagger, the smirk, the careless arrogance. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Even the way he carried himself told me something had broken inside him. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. His voice, once booming and confident, barely carried past the doorstep. I nodded, stepping aside. We sat in the living room where I had spent so many nights thinking about that wedding. He didn't touch the coffee I poured for him. He only stared at his hands, fumbling with his ring as though it burned his skin. Finally, he spoke. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have laughed at you. I don't know why I did it. Nerves, pride, stupidity, maybe all of it. But I see now. I humiliated myself more than I ever humiliated you." His voice cracked on the last words. I studied him carefully. This wasn't the man who had mocked me in front of a crowd. This was a boy who had been stripped of his illusions, standing in the wreckage of his own choices. I leaned forward, my hands folded. "Eric," I said slowly, "you thought that laugh made you powerful, but power isn't found in mocking others. It's found in respect, and respect is something you earn, not something you take." He swallowed hard, nodding. "You laughed at the wrong man," I continued, "not because I am stronger than you, not because I have more than you, but because I carry something you don't understand yet, dignity, and dignity cannot be destroyed by cruelty." His eyes glistened, and for once he had no comeback. No smirk, no defense, only silence. I stood, walking to the window where the autumn light spilled across the floor. "The cost of that laugh will follow you, Eric. Not because I want revenge, but because you showed everyone who you truly are. And once people see the truth, it cannot be unseen." He lowered his head. "I know," he whispered. For a long time we sat in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence of humiliation anymore. It was the silence of a man finally seeing himself clearly. I didn't need him to say more. Justice had already been served, not by me, not even by his mother, but by the weight of his own reflection, and that was punishment enough. Time has a way of peeling back masks. By the spring, the whispers that began on that wedding night had hardened into truth. No one admired Eric anymore. No one envied him. He had become a cautionary tale, the groom who mocked his bride's father and was humbled by his own mother in front of a hall full of witnesses. He moved through family gatherings like a shadow, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered. Gone were the boasts, the loud jokes, the smirk he once wore like armor. Pride had abandoned him, and in its place was silence. But where Eric faded, my daughter grew closer to me. She visited often, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just sitting quietly at the kitchen table with me. One evening, she held my hand and whispered, "Dad, I see it now. I see the man he really is, and I see the man you've always been." Tears welled in her eyes. You've carried me, supported me, and never once tried to humiliate me or anyone. That's real strength. That's what I should have been looking for in a husband. I squeezed her hand gently. Sweetheart, I don't want you to carry shame for his actions. I only want you to carry the lesson. People will reveal who they are sooner or later, and when they do, believe them. She nodded, her grip tightening, as though she was holding onto me not just as her father, but as the anchor she had nearly overlooked. As the months stretched on, Eric's presence grew smaller and smaller. He avoided eye contact with me, avoided conversation with his mother, even avoided his own friends. His laughter, once so loud it filled a room, now sounded strained, almost pitiful. He was living in the wreckage of a single moment, and though I offered him no cruelty, I offered him no rescue either. Some lessons I knew had to be lived. One quiet afternoon, I walked through my home, pausing by the family photographs on the wall. My wife's smile beamed back at me from years long gone, my daughter's childhood captured in frozen joy. I realized then what my real inheritance was. It wasn't money or property or possessions. It was dignity. It was truth. It was the unshakable foundation of respect I had built with my own two hands. And though Eric had tried to strip me of it with one cruel laugh, he had failed. Instead, he had shown the entire family and my daughter most of all just how priceless dignity truly is. That was my gift, my legacy, and it would outlive every cruel laugh, every arrogant smirk, every attempt to belittle me. Because truth doesn't fade, and dignity cannot be stolen. The seasons turned once more, and with them came peace. The sting of that wedding night no longer burned as it once had. Instead, it lingered like a scar, a reminder, but not a wound. Eric remained a shell of the man he pretended to be. At gatherings, he sat quietly, his laughter muted, his arrogance gone. He was present, but never the center. His fall was not loud or dramatic. It was slow, steady, and inescapable. My daughter, though, grew stronger. She leaned on me more, not out of weakness, but out of recognition. She saw in me what she had once overlooked, a father who had carried his family with dignity, who had endured humiliation without breaking, who had let truth fight louder than any outburst could. One evening, as we sat together, she whispered, "Dad, you've given me the greatest inheritance I could ask for, not money, not gifts, but the example of what respect and strength really look like." Those words meant more to me than anything, because that was the lesson I had wanted her to carry all along. Eric's laugh had once silenced me, but in the end, it destroyed him. Cruelty always does. I realized then that betrayal doesn't need revenge. Arrogance doesn't need punishment. Time and truth are enough, because the man who mocked me was already sowing the seeds of his downfall. And the justice that followed wasn't mine to deliver, it was his to face. So now, when I look back on that night, I don't feel shame, I feel pride, because I learned and showed my daughter that dignity can outlast humiliation, that respect, once earned, cannot be taken away. And I leave this lesson for anyone who listens. Mockery may win a moment, but truth always wins the story. That is the final word. Cruelty may laugh the loudest, but justice always speaks last. Thank you for watching Betrayal to Justice. If this story left its mark on you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales where betrayal collapses, dignity rises, and truth always finds its voice.